republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 3, noting of the roll.
Noted there is a quorum. Mr. Berger and Mr. Spiz are excused, and if everybody could pull their mics down so that the TV picks it up.
Thank you. Number 4, approval of tonight's agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion we approve tonight's agenda dated July 13, 2024.
I'll second.
June 13th.
Thank you. June 13, 2024.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Number 5, conflicts of interest, ex parte contact. Anything for this evening? Seeing none, we will move on to number 6, approval of the minutes. Planning Commission regular meeting, 5/23/24.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion we approve the minutes of the Planning Commission regular meeting 5/23/24.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, number 7, public comment on items not scheduled for public hearing or on this agenda. Seeing none, we will move on to number 8, commissioners' comments. Does anybody have anything they would like to bring up or discuss this evening? None? All right. Moving on to number 9, public hearing. Zoning ordinance, text amendments to Article 2 with a definition of correlated color, temperature, and Section 10.2 to allow LED exterior lighting, regulate correlated color temperature, required method for controlling or adjusting lighting, prohibit excessive lighting, and exempt allowed sign lighting.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we open a public hearing at 7:02.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we will open the public hearing at 7:02.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mateo Paslacqua, Carlisle Wortman Associates, Township Planning Consultants.
Excuse me, but can you turn on the microphone?
I know, I don't even hear it going.
I don't think it's on. I can't hear any of you guys either.
Yeah, that's all right.
Test. Test. Okay, there we go. Is that better? Okay. Yeah, so for the public hearing, the ORC's been working on some amendments to the zoning ordinance language as it relates to defining and having the light requirements in the zoning ordinance itself. Some of the items in which the ORC was working to kind of better define and deal with relate to the definition of, different color of lighting and the kelvins, basically the warmth of the light that it gives off. To include LED lighting in the types of lighting that is permitted, within either it be building lighting or site lighting, things of that nature. To restrict the pole-mounted and building lighting to a 3,500 Kelvin. So if you're familiar with the Kelvin scale, the higher the number is, the warmer the light, the lower the number is, the brighter the, or is it the other? It's the higher it goes, it's the brighter of a white it can be, and the lower it goes is a warmer. And 3,500, usually between 3,000 and 4,000 is kind of an industry standard. So the 3,500 it's a fair regulation as it relates to site lighting and kind of the color that it gives off. Also, a requirement to have developers or people proposing projects or applicants explain if there's going to be extensive site lighting, how can that lighting be reduced or dimmed during non-operational hours, predominantly in the evening. But this is again just to kind of prevent lots being lit up at all hours of the evening for potentially no apparent reason. Basically, the restriction of using lighting as a method of getting attention for businesses is, ironically enough, we've actually had some businesses inquire about different ways in which they might be able to light their property in a manner that would draw more attention to them. We have some language in the ordinance right now, but it's a little loose. This is a lot better as it relates to kind of prohibiting that from happening. And then also giving the zoning administrator or the building official the ability to exempt these rules from the new sign regulations for like electronic messaging signs. So if there's something related to the lighting and that signage that would violate these rules, there is some wiggle room at Township Hall to work with them if there's a compelling reason for that. So I know Megan's been the one that's been working on this, but that's kind of the summation of the language. The language was provided in red line form as far as what they're proposing to change. So if there's any questions, again, I know Megan has worked more closely with the ORC on this one. I will do my best to answer them, but I have looked through the red lines and I feel as though it's self-explanatory, but I wouldn't make that assumption.
I have
Questions?
No questions?
Point of order. The first thing in a public hearing is the presentation by the petitioner. In this case, the township is the petitioner, so Mateo is doing the presentation. Then the public hearing is opened, and you only hear from the public. Close the public hearing. Then it comes to comments, if Mateo had more, and then review of correspondence, and your discussion.
And do they vote outside of the public hearing, correct? Okay, because I will require a vote approving this to go to the township board for review and readings.
Yeah, so before the commission discusses, here is a member of the public, so you give the member of the public an opportunity to speak. If she has nothing that she wants to say, then the public hearing is closed and you go on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good if there's someone from the public.
Are you wanting to speak to the commission tonight?
Make a motion that we close the public hearing at 7:07.
Second.
Motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I need a point of order, a little explanation. From here, can you help me out again, Susan, please?
So from here would be, the public hearing in this case is the same as if there was an applicant, an outside applicant. So after the public hearing is closed, then we would hear from the township consultant and or staff if Tim London were here and had something to add. Then there would be a review of correspondence if we had any. And then you discuss.
And then we're looking.
And then a motion.
Then a
The
motion.
motion would be to forward this on to recommend to the.
To recommend either approval or denial to
The township
Township
board.
board.
And they have one reading or two?
They would have two.
Sometimes we forget these older folks here.
So I jumped the gun with my explanation, but I wouldn't have anything further to add. I'm sorry, John.
I don't know about you. Okay, so then we can discuss this, ask any questions, anything more you want to add?
Nope.
I just, Mr. Chair, if I could, the ORC went through this 3 times, I believe, and we were pretty confident what the outcome was. The attorney had a chance to look at it, so the red line here is pretty self-explanatory what we were doing. Mateo did a fine job of outlining the 3 or 4 things that we were most interested in from the ORC level.
Yeah, this is something we spent quite a bit of time on, actually.
And that's 3 out of the 5.
Yeah, that's a good.
And 2
Yeah.
either none or-
No, I'm familiar with, we have some more lighting where I work and it dims at night. When there's motion, the light foot candle level comes up. I'm familiar with this. I think it's a good thing to have.
Okay.
Well, if there's no questions, no discussion,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this to move on to the board for their consideration.
I'll second that.
okay? We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion, any questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries.
Okay. All right, next part for the evening for what we have for you guys is master plan updates, kind of master plan light tonight.
What, master plan?
Master plan light, diet master plan. It's just a few things to do. We are continuing to work on the future land use map, you know, kind of per our last meeting, which was very productive. Some more information's kind of been collected since then. So that one's still in process, but we at least wanted to get kind of two of the easier ones in front of you this evening, one being vision goals and objectives and the other design guidelines. You were provided redlined copies. These edits were based on the conversation from the last meeting. So if there's any questions, comments, concerns, we'll start with vision goals and objectives first. I know, I believe Mr. Ballard, you were not present at the last meeting? Okay, all right. And Mr. Wolosek, you were not present as well, correct? Okay, all right. I mean, if there's any questions as it relates to it, I'm happy to answer them. If there's any concerns, if the edits look good, we're good to go and finalize and move on. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
Mr. Chair, a question if you don't mind.
Sure.
Vision goals and objectives, that's the area you want to talk about right now?
Yeah.
For the, so, under goals, the objectives under community character, there was some wording in the previous master plan. I guess I'm trying to determine how this differs, this update or this rewrite of the master plan, how this is different than the 2019.
So if
I know it's a very that's a very broad question.
I mean, the foundation of your vision goals and objectives comes out of your 2019 plan. I mean, we did not rewrite a full set of vision goals and objectives. It wasn't necessarily part of the scope of what we were brought on to do. So I would say that the text that is not redlined by far and away is based off of your 2019 plan and has not been modified. I know this is not the first time we've seen vision goals and objectives. We kind of worked on them when we did the big boards. So this is reflective of those edits. It's reflective of the comments from the last meeting. So I would say that they're substantially from 2019, but they are not word for word from 2019.
Okay. One of the things I was reflecting on was there was some language in the 2019 about, and it was, I think, comments from the community from when their surveys were done back then that were added about buffer zones, keeping those buffer zones that were already in existing zoning ordinances. There was language, and I'm wondering if those kind of language is being carried forward. It was an objective. I could probably find the page in 2019 if I thumb through it. It would just take me a little while. And I'm just wondering if that kind of language is being carried forward.
I'm just looking at the language now. I mean, I don't remember conversations about buffers necessarily in the vision goals objectives as far as being edited or modified. I know in the design guidelines, which we'll get to next, we've outlined
It would be there potentially.
some of that language. Well, yeah, I mean, there's different ways in which these sections can influence the decisions that the township decides to make or the community makes when they're confronted with, developments to consider, zoning rewrites to consider, so on and so forth.
Are we talking about existing buffers, maintaining the existing buffers, or are we talking about the adding or maintaining the language that puts buffers in developments?
No, I'm talking about continuing what was already in there. What was already in 2019.
I guess my question would be, why would we take a buffer out? If the buffer's in, why would we take it out?
No, and I'm supporting it staying the way it was, that's all, I'm just looking for
I see,
that.
the language in the master plan, you're talking about the pure language.
Right.
Okay, so I look at an application.
Right, I just want to see that carried forward, and I didn't know if in this rewrite, if it was being a completely rewritten document and removing some of that language, or if it was maybe just not part of what we've gotten to yet.
Updates are tough. A rewrite it's all new. We're not, we're good with what we've got. Let's use it for another 5 years. That's easy. The updates are tough because it's a give and take between we're going to keep a little bit of this and bit of that.
I think that we can take Don's suggestion
No, 100.
and see if it's, you know, what it was in the 19, and then investigate what it is in the proposed, and see if we have a match. If we don't, then adjust accordingly.
I would agree. I would just say that if you can reach out to me with, if there was a specific part of VGO that you were referring to, it doesn't have to be now, but if you can email it to me so that I have that for, yeah.
In one of our last meetings when we were voting on something.
Well, I think that was design guidelines. You wanted kind of an increased buffer consideration for some of the commercial and industrial design guidelines that we were establishing if they were abutting residential, I believe, which we did.
You know, this was residential lot line, you know, distance, and it was language in the master plan that basically said, let's continue to enforce existing zoning ordinances.
So-
It supported my stance on the vote that night, both the master plan and the PUD language that we had married together, and that was the basis for my vote that night.
Yeah, that's fine. I would say send me what you've got, and even if you don't have it word for word, I will comb through VGO, and if the buffer language needs to be adjusted, we can adjust it. If it's not there for whatever reason, we can get it back in.
I'm sorry, maybe I misspoke in saying the buffer language specifically. It was more reference to adhering and continuing to support the existing zoning ordinances. Is really what the whole was. And I'll find it. The second one that I had was related to the traffic, and maybe we'll get to that as we go through this further. Should I pause my comments for that and wait till you want me to?
You talk about the transportation
Go ahead.
the transportation section?
Yeah, transportation. I'm kind of jumping ahead. I
4.
apologize for skipping over things. If you'd like to go back.
Let's go through it kind of in order if there's no other questions until that part.
I mean, for us, we'll go through. We'll take a look at each red line and go from there. So, I'm sorry, John.
Where are you starting then?
But let's go to page 1. It's always a great place to start.
Find out.
So for vision, based on some feedback from the last meeting, the vision statement now says Oxford Township is a place of natural beauty and economic prosperity. The township will preserve these assets in a manner that provides balance between the growing community, infrastructure capacities, and the natural environment. Any questions or comments or concerns? Okay, if we go to page 2. So this is under community character, objective 6. Objective 6 now reads, manage the extension of public sewer and water services within the limits of the water sewer master plan and urban service boundaries. And that was akin to just making sure that we reference other plans that are being developed kind of concurrently with this as a basis point for, again, kind of some decisions around infrastructure. Okay. All right. So transportation, page 4. Objective 2 reads, promote orderly, efficient access to developing land and improving circulation throughout the township and the region through the extension, paving, and maintenance of roadways. We deleted including the research and resource allocation to developing north-south routes alternate to M24, only because there's new objectives at the end that we feel address that better. So to that point, objective 5 reads, work with the Road Commission of Oakland County to identify transportation improvements and potential funding partnerships for implementation. Objective 6 reads, research the improvement of traffic flow as well as alternative motorized north-south routes and east-west connectors throughout the community. So that was the objective that we felt better encompassed the entire community than just focused on M24.
Can I?
Yeah.
So this is a section, so under transportation, and I'm looking at the master plan from 2019. The master plan from 2008, it calls out Thomas Road Extension, Hummer Lake Road Extension, North Oxford Road Connector, a few others. I won't go through all of them.
Mm-hmm.
You're familiar. Is this new updated, or I shouldn't say updated, rewritten master plan, does it have specific language, or will it in other areas like the 19 did?
Yeah, so the transportation section of the master plan will still reference some of those older areas, but then we also got feedback that we need to start thinking about other areas and other corridor areas as well. So
Those
you,
are a carryover from previous.
Correct.
Previous master plan. And I think that when you talk about research and improve and work with the road commission, in our objective 5 and 6, we can scrub on those and not necessarily carry those forward, because I don't think anything's gonna happen with those.
yeah, I believe, I know there was conversation about it.
Not all of them, but some of them.
Yeah, and I think it was more is more. Adding, you could keep what's there. Granted, they have been carryovers that not much has been done with, but they're there in case you need to. But their focus, there's a lot of focus on the northern half within those corridors, and the conversation need to work towards Drainer, need to work towards M24. So that'll be added in that section, and we'll have that draft available for you in coming meetings.
Okay, okay, I just,
We have seen it in our, we're coming up in 4 years, but in the last 4 years, it's an emphasis on the northern quadrant, some good emphasis on developing and supporting that. All of a sudden, it's all at Drainer and 24 now.
Yeah,
Everything is at Drainer and 24.
yeah.
That was my question. In the definition where you talk about these different roads, have we really looked and studied Drainer Road south on the west side of 24?
Drainer Road, west side of 24 south, like the area south, like that area of the township.
There's, Drainer Road carries a tremendous amount of traffic to 24.
Correct.
And as I think about this, if you were to finish paving Drainer Road to the west to Baldwin,
Okay.
okay? That gives you another outlet on Baldwin. Then there's Coates Road and Newman Road that go south. If any of those were improved, they would take you into Orion Township and basically Indian Way.
Correct.
So it's,
I think that will all work with objective number 6, research the improvement of traffic flow as well as alternate motorized north-south routes and east-west connectors throughout the community. I
but
appreciate,
in today's master plan, there are roads that are specifically called out.
and that's what I was gonna address. They've been called out for many master plans. I think we need to really scrub on those to see if we wanna carry that forward or not. I've talked about that all through the master plan, even the steering committee, about those roads, Hummer Lake and some of the roads, I don't remember them all, but they're all listed. And they've been listed since, I think, 2011 in our master plans. I don't know if we need to continue to carry those on. I like the idea of objective 6 to research the improvements, because so much has changed. The needs of the community have changed since 2011.
Well,
But
that's why I bring these other roads
Yeah.
up, because it doesn't appear that there's been any
I-
discussion or appearance of those.
yeah, Drainer Road by name is going to make it into the transportation section. There's no way around, and it's pretty much coast to coast. Because I believe that you're right, because I think that there is potential for Baldwin to alleviate some of what's happening on 24. You just got to get to it. You know what I mean? So I think that,
And it's not attractive to get to it today
right.
from Coates on, because it's gravel, it's curvy.
Oh, trust me, I've come up during traffic and gone every which way. And yeah, I mean, I've been guilty of the 50 miles an hour and then it's gravel and
8 o'clock in the morning at the intersection of 24 and Drainer.
yeah,
And watch the flow that comes out of Drainer onto 24.
yeah.
It is really heavy.
or cuts through Red Barn Sub.
Well, yeah,
So I think then I think we're going to capture all that in the transportation section.
okay.
Member from the audience.
What might that be? I live on East Drainer. I probably don't need to say too much more.
No,
I've been here 40-plus years, and what I've seen is terrible, what they've done to the land.
yeah.
And what the traffic is gonna be, I think I'll need a reservation to get out of them. I'm about a mile down from 24. I've already started going around the back one, because I can't deal with what's going on down there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the reality really needs to be proven to anyone in the community about Drainer, and like I said, it's going to have its share in the master plan, which then will, and again, the funding, that's kind of why Objective 5 is there, because we can do all the studies we want and have all the cool poster boards we want, but got to figure out a way to pay for it too, so.
Exactly right.
And while it talks about the county road commission, should we say other townships as well?
I think you could add in other agencies in that.
You might wanna do that because of NDOT.
It's where yeah, it's kind of where I thought, but yeah, let's go with
Good idea. Good point.
other agencies.
But I like the idea of, Drainer Road, but leaving it north, south, east, rather than naming specific,
Yep.
because Plan A doesn't work out. I don't want Plan B not being an option because it wasn't part of the master plan. So
Sure.
I like just leaving north-south routes, east-west connectors,
Perfect.
and we can adjust as needed.
Great. Those are the red lines. Any other comments, questions, vision, goals, objectives? No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, design guidelines. These ones were not as intensive of updates, but nevertheless important. I know that Commissioner Spiz had mentioned wanting to see a range in the reference in the opening paragraph, because we were just citing kind of an average daily trip number. This is the range of kind of the lowest in the northern part of Lapeer Road, and then the highest in the southern part of Lapeer Road. I'll just make sure everyone's got it in front of them, design guidelines.
We'll figure that out.
So any concerns with the range language? Okay.
Are those good numbers?
They're as recent as SEMCOG has, which I want to say is 22.
That's fine.
So then on the next page, the only thing here that we wanted to highlight, at least on this page, and it's highlighted in all of them, is we've provided images and some sample renderings. Those will actually be populated with custom content. Those drawings are actually sourced out of Ohio zoning ordinance. I just appreciated the way they were put together. But when we get to the portion where we finalize this, we'll actually generate some custom images for that.
The township or you say custom image?
I'm sorry, so I guess custom renderings is the better way to go, the layouts at the bottom. The imaging we can work with. I want to try to put a picture to the overall intent of what we're looking to do with real life examples, more or less local.
Rub it in. Sure, go ahead.
So the second page of that is a design guideline that shows the two buildings at the bottom, or kind of in the middle of the page here.
Yeah.
These, do you think, from your experience, having an ability for someone, for saying, driving down 24, to pull off quickly, run in, grab a coffee, or pick up something from a retail establishment, whatever it might be, and then continue on, should we have an option like that for customers? Because I see a lot of the parking is either on the side or maybe in the back. Is that something to consider?
I think it is for two reasons. This district is Drainer to Minnetonka, which is the village border.
Right.
Your lots along Drainer are very old and antiquated through that district. I know that the speed limit, it starts to taper off, but I think you're still at 45 or 40.
You talking M24 or Drainer?
M24 from Drainer to Minnetonka. So the lots are really set up to where you could not have a traditional setback retail center. I mean, take that back. Yeah, it would be difficult to do it, and because of the proximity to the village, if you're looking to kind of build off a little bit of what they have as it relates to a more traditional downtown feel, that is the area in which that's going to happen per the restriction of those lots and the proximity to the village. the design guidelines that are designed for north of that are much more like traditional suburban and industrial in nature.
Yeah, my thoughts were more about where do I stop when I go to pick something up along the way? And a lot of times, because 24 is so busy, I just want to get through it. I'm just trying to to allow, there's a store there that I can pull off easily, quickly, park safely, get out, do business, and then leave. That might be good for business in those areas, that's all.
Sure.
I saw one of the images kind of shows some parking off to the side. And it's not that I'm trying to create a downtown feel, it's more about the convenience and the opportunity to use that establishment.
That's the entire M24 corridor that we just redid 2-3 years ago. I don't think you're gonna get MDOT to come in, cut the curbs out, put pull-offs for parking lots with it.
And this is further south of downtown.
Is it? Yeah, south of the village,
Yeah.
down to Draina.
Talk it down to Draina Road.
You're saying you can't see them permitting more curb cuts for developments like this?
I don't.
I mean, this is redevelopment because you're built through that corridor.
Yeah.
So this is more or less kind of laying out the thought process that eventually this is kind of what the type of development we would like to see in these areas. Because right now you do have 1 million curb cuts on it because the lots are small and narrow and they service this 5,000 square foot office building and it serves this car wash and then it serves this, so on and so forth. Really what would be preferable with guiding people in this direction or developers in this direction is to take some of those lots, combine them, and make them into a more uniform type of development where I would see probably the parking along the side is the more likely scenario than necessarily around the back. And that would give you kind of some buffer between the buildings. It would give, I think, the ability for traffic maneuvering a little bit easier. I don't necessarily foresee just an endless row of street front stores with all the parking in the back. I don't think that's where you get to, but maybe a little bit closer to the village that's possible. But I think as you work your way south, you're more likely to see the parking to the south. But I'd say the goal here is to maybe see if there isn't some encouragement in consolidating some of those lots to try to get developments of this style. Now that's what we're putting in front of you. If this isn't kind of the direction you see that corridor going in or not when you think that it should, this doesn't have to exist. Although we're definitely at the point of making that decision.
I think it's a good desire to have if the opportunity presents itself. But you have to have the opportunity to present yourself.
I agree.
So it doesn't hurt putting it in for guidelines. That's what they're for.
I agree. Thank you, John, for clarifying.
Especially if you get north village limits, like where Culver's, Tractor Supply, and the Leo's building is. There's a secondary road there that allows you to pull in one of the entrances, and then you can go any one of those three
Correct.
without being in a heavy traffic lane. And I think that concept, where you've got new ground or new land, like the area north of Ray Road, would be ideal to do for the future. And I don't see that concept outlined here at all.
Not there, but if you turn the page, it's the next one. So the next kind of design guideline area is from the village north to Dunlap. It also encompasses actually Drainer Road to Indian Lake. So it's kind of broken up between the two areas, but it's Drainer Road south of Indian Lake along 24 because you do have more traditional retail development there.
I apologize, I see the red line now that's been inserted.
No, you're fine. No, I remember it from the last meeting. And so to those areas, again, kind of the village up to Ray and then Drainer down to Indian Lake is kind of this more traditional retail suburban type of setup or commercial setup. So what we added to those was and this might speak to your comments, Don, about buffering, increased landscape buffer requirements where developments about residential uses, and then incorporate the use of service drives and deceleration lanes. So that's kind of what I took from the last meeting as far as this district was concerned. So.
If I can add to that. Sure. So I'm just, as I was reading that, I was thinking about, and looking at the plan view or the bird's eye view of the image on the bottom left there, and thinking about, this is residential behind here, that, you know, sometimes deliveries take place at early in the morning and behind these facilities, the types of facilities that help to have some language maybe to protect the neighbors from, let's say, either a, you know, privacy wall, a 6-foot, whatever that might be, to help with noise if there's residential abutting that. Not only the landscape buffering, but some sort of maybe there's already requirements I'm just not aware of.
I think,
Wouldn't that be more ordinance related than master plan related?
I would think so.
You, yeah, yes.
That's,
we've got pretty involved with fencing, privacy
Walls, yeah.
and things for site plans, so I
Okay.
think that can be.
okay, I'm just trying to look out for our neighbors, you know. I want to see that a lot of people don't like a big box store potentially, and we start unloading at 5 in the morning and 6 in the morning next to them. They don't make it anymore, so we try to have as much language to protect them as possible.
Yeah, I mean, we can, I think, I think if you wanted to open up the door to kind of, you could get rid of landscape and say buffers and just leave it open to like there's numerous options available to kind of make sure that whatever it is, it buffers these developments when they abut residential. I mean, privacy walls, stone walls, those are considered landscaping as well. I know I always think about like plants, you know, a bunch of pine trees with landscape buffers, but you know, the rock walls, things of that nature are also considered landscaping. So I think you're protected here, but I'm happy for edits, whichever way.
Just some input, that's all.
No, I got you.
Yeah.
Good
Oh,
point.
we're good.
With that,
I was just trying to think in my mind, were we gonna put something like that north of Ray Road right now? Go ahead.
well, I was just going to say if there are any other questions or concerns about this district, we can move on to the next.
Go ahead.
All right. And so last but not least is the highway district or highway view district. So this would be M24 Dunlap up to Thomas. And so this is kind of, again, more oriented to some of the industrial uses that we've discussed, but just kind of making sure that they still, you know, interact and comply and become a part of the community without necessarily being a nuisance to either design, abutting residential areas, traffic, so on and so forth. So this is another one where we did the incorporation of service drives and deceleration lanes. And this is one where we did the increasing of the landscaping buffers abutting residential uses.
You know, the only
Go.
comment I have,
No, go ahead.
you had the red line under design objects of the M24 highway view districts. Work with the RCOC and the NDOT to ensure site design allows for limited access to 24. I think that's very, very key, because they're heavy hitters in regards to how that's going to turn out and how we're going to use the deceleration lanes and those things to complement service drive, to complement new development. So they go very much hand in hand with that.
Agreed.
I have a question, just going to question, comment. So the 5th bullet point talks about established multifamily and dense housing options, and it goes on at the end of that sentence, it says about the need for missing middle housing. I've heard us talk about that.
Where are you at?
I'm in the 5th
It's,
bullet.
Bill,
under
it's
design.
not redlined. It's under design objectives. It's the 5th bullet point.
Yeah, make sure you got it.
I got it.
Okay, got it. So I wanted just to ask, missing middle housing. Help me understand what that is. I get an idea.
I think it's
Elaborate.
really more or less to encompass workforce housing, but that's not a statement of like to support minimum wage workers. It's of all types. So these developments will employ a range of multiple different incomes. And so the thought process just being, again, that if we have some level of workforce affordable housing, that is the wrong way. It's not affordable housing by the definition of what the government or what we think it is. It's more from the perspective of you have people who are going to be on these sites who are going to have an annual income of 40K. There'll be people who have 80K, and there'll be a few that have 150K. This is really more or less to just establish that you need housing to support these things from the perspective of, if you don't have a lot of transportations outside of a vehicle, and if you don't have enough of that kind of workforce housing, then that commute becomes a burden and hiring becomes a burden. I mean, we see, there's not a lot of signs out saying now hiring starting at 150K, but there's more than enough out saying now hiring starting at 30K.
But if you reverse that and say the industrial north of town is hiring, they're gonna have to attract our supervisors talked many times about this, about attracting the workforce. They're not gonna be able to afford to live in the community here. So you do need to mention this missing middle housing.
Yes.
Because it's, the jobs that they're creating out there with Barrencast right now, I don't think that they're going to be able to support the average homes in this area.
Right.
You don't have any $200,000-$300,000 houses going up.
Well, and unfortunately, I mean, there's still a challenging argument made for rent, but there is still, even in that economic workforce section of, yes, rent might only be a couple $100 a month less than what it is for a mortgage, but home ownership is different than renting. You've got a $3,000 mortgage and your furnace goes, you better come up with $8,000. You're renting for $2,000 a month and your furnace goes, you call the landlord. I'm not saying he fixes it tomorrow, but there's still a benefit to that certain level of to have that kind of multifamily product in proximity to these employment centers. That's not me. That's not me. I just stepped away. Yeah, let me adjust it. So, any other questions, comments, concerns?
No, the comment comes from, our discussions about if there's gonna be a higher density development near the M24 corridor downtown, that seems to make sense, right? And I think our master plan, even 2019, supports that direction. Would you agree with that?
I mean, yes, I'd have to go back and refer to it
Okay.
more strongly to confirm.
The further away we get away from downtown, say the less density start to, the lot size per household increases.
Sure.
Okay. I'm just trying to, frame that and kind of keep that in place.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to have the language that increases density further away when the feedback we seem to get is that we want less density. So I guess it's a very difficult balance between density and cost of home ownership or renting and what that might look like.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, right? We're all walking that fine line between the preservation goals and the development goals. I think what I would envision out of something like this, should it ever come to fruition, that the northern portion of Lapeer Road develops into an employment center of predominantly industrial or R&D centers, is that within a close proximity of those, you would have a dense housing option or product. But it's not going to go that far off of M24, predominantly because of infrastructure. There is a certain amount of infrastructure you have to have that kind of housing, and it's not there yet. Over time, it may make its way there, but even if it gets there, I don't think that it travels that far east-west off of M24.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
All right, I've got my marching orders for master plan, so I appreciate it. Okay, new business. You want me just into new business?
Sure.
Okay. So new business, tonight you have in front of you a draft ordinance that the ORC's been working on as it relates to renewable energy ordinances in the community. That ordinance is influenced by the passing of Public Act 233, which happened last year in November, which is basically the state's mandate for communities to either develop renewable energy ordinances or let the state oversee, review, and approve those projects regardless of where they are within the state. So I know that the ORC's worked on this. I've actually, for the company, done a lot of work on this. I know Megan had a presentation that was put together, and you got the language in front of you. More or less the gist of it is that the way the law is set up is there's been laws that have been put in place over the last couple of years that have basically pushed the utility companies towards hitting certain renewable energy benchmarks. Those laws have been passed. They need to generate, 70% of their power needs to be renewable by 2030. This is not verbatim, but I'm giving examples. Now it's coming to the point where in order to generate that kind of energy, the utilities now need land because, 150 megawatt solar field needs 600 acres. 150 megawatt coal plant needs 10. So now the utility companies are coming back and saying, if we're going to meet these thresholds, we need to start freeing up land to do this. So this was the state's way of basically telling townships, cities, other municipalities that you need to come up with ordinances that allow for these types of developments. The law only references certain nameplate systems. So it's 50 megawatt solar systems, it's 100 megawatt wind systems, and it is battery systems that have the capability of storing 50 to 200 megawatts. 50 megawatts of solar, 600 acres. 100 megawatts of wind is 600 to 700 acres. Again, topography, wetlands, all that plays a role in this. So we're talking about, net acreage, not gross. Battery is kind of the anomaly. You can get 50 to 200 megawatts of storage out of a 5-acre battery site. So with all that being said, we're kind of working with our clients to develop an ordinance or renewable energy ordinances that are compliant with the state's rules. And so when the state passed these rules for these big systems, they told you what your setbacks are going to be. They told you what your height limits are going to be. They told you what your noise limits are going to be for the large systems. So really, in order to have a compatible renewable energy ordinance, you just need to copy paste what the state told you to do. Where it's been a little challenging is the state really didn't talk to zoning. They didn't talk to landscape buffers. They didn't talk to all these additional requirements or studies that whether townships or cities or villages could require these applicants who are going to build this style of system if you could require more of them. Because the law does state that if you're more restrictive than the state law, you're considered non-compatible, you lose your local control, and the state gets the call. These questions still haven't been answered by the state, and more than likely they'll make their way through court and get answered there. But what we're kind of working with our clients on is we don't think it's unreasonable to designate, so long as the zoning area that you're offering up is reasonable, considering the size and the space that these facilities will need. We think that it's better to plan for a zoning regulation, picking areas within your community where these things would go, as opposed to assuming that the state said you couldn't. Because if the state decides that you can't, it's easier to repeal. It's easier to make a map amendment change by saying, well, we'll just get rid of the overlay, than it is to all of a sudden have to write in and go through the exercise of where you're going to put these things. So the current ordinance in front of you is state compliant. The other thing that we're working with the communities is the question comes up, well, what if I have a 40 megawatt solar facility? It's 50 or above for the state rules. What about less than? The state hasn't offered any guidance on that. So we've all interpreted that as it's local control as usual. Write it how you want it. Do what you're going to do. As long as it's reasonable, it works. So the ordinance that you have in front of you speaks to two schedules. It speaks to a Schedule A, which relates to your state-sized facilities, and Schedule B, which is everything else below those nameplates. And so those ones come with a little bit more restriction and a little bit more rules because there's nothing in the state law that says you can't. And honestly, I would say that you guys are in kind of a unique position with the ORC choosing that the overlay or the area in which these facilities could go is the same as the gravel overlay. It's actually a unique position to be in because it is a substantial geography in the community, and it puts those landowners who kind of have these sites where sometimes to the naked eye, they're clear for 10 or 15 years while they're digging. So you've actually found yourself in kind of a unique situation where you kind of already set up for a unique use in a unique area, and you're just kind of adding to that. With that, like I said, I know Megan put together a good presentation. The memo that we provided, I helped out with a lot, and I think is very helpful in understanding. This is just really a chance for you guys to review it. We would probably look to do the public hearing in July, to get it to the township in August, because the one timeline that we're working against is in November of this year. If you do not have a CREO, that's what they're calling them, a compatible renewable energy ordinance. If you do not have a CREO by the end of November of this year, you are automatically deemed non-compliant, which basically means a developer or an applicant could come in, say you're not compliant, I'm going to take this to the state, and the state's going to decide where it goes within your community. So with all that, if that wasn't enough or too much, I'm happy to answer questions. Again, this is kind of a review. This is not, there's no vote required this evening, but I'm happy to kind of educate how I can.
Any questions on this? I know
I just have-
the ORC's been working on it.
The ORC, with input from Megan, decided to bring it to the planning commission as an overview, because this is, for the folks that haven't had a chance to work with this, like the ORC, as it's hard to grasp what's happening. So we thought we would get it to the entire planning commission early and not allow them to have the ample time to review it prior to the July meeting. Yeah. So there was some thought given to that. There's a lot of work in this.
It is, and it's kind of a best foot forward at this point, because it's going to be unproven water come November of this year. And that's not news to anyone. You guys aren't at any more risk than the next guy about, well, how is this all going to get tested in court and so on and so forth. But to John's point, yeah, I mean, it's a heavy lift. It's one that we've been working on. I've been following this for a year, and I've done a lot of work with other communities on it as well. So again, just to kind of back John's point, like we kind of putting it in front of you as a preamble to the public hearing that we'll have in July.
We have it to the point where the attorney is looking at it now. Our original plan had been to bring it to the 27th June meeting for a public hearing. But based on current information, we will not have a quorum on that night.
Correct.
So we can't do anything with it. So that's why July 11th is now the day that we bring it in, have the public hearing, but this gives you a preview of what our thoughts are, so that you can look at it. And when we have our meeting on the 27th, if you have any comments against it, we can certainly talk about it at that point.
And I would say, so referencing the 27th, which may not happen,
Right.
I would say that, again, it's a heavy lift. So if you're looking at it between now and then, reach out to Megan or I with questions, again, not from the perspective of, just from the perspective of going into the public hearing, feeling more comfortable about what you're reading and how to understand it. Like I said, it's intimidating at first. And this is coming from like someone who followed it. But again, we've been working on it long enough to where I think the memo does a really good job of walking you through the steps. And like I said, you've got Schedule A and Schedule B. Schedule A is for the state stuff, and it's copy pasted. B is for the smaller stuff, and that's where, again, we've put into play what we feel are the appropriate studies to ask for, the appropriate setbacks to use, the appropriate height, bulk, placement regulations, landscaping, so on and so forth. Again, the bigger question is going to come down is if these state systems really take off and how communities choose to work with them from the perspective of additional requirements. The law is set up to where the MPSC gets a year to review these things. Townships, municipalities, and villages get 3 months. Now, that doesn't seem fair, and in some ways it won't be, because for the first couple of review of these, we're going to be in unproven waters. However, there is a thought process that the developer wants to work with the community. The developer doesn't want to sit around for a year waiting for the state to say yes or no. They want to get their answer in 90 days so they can get their permits and they can get their stuff on site and do what they need to do. So there is some thought process that there'll be some negotiation, there'll be some work back and forth. But again, I'm sorry.
And on top of this, there are some groups that are gonna take this to court and try to fight it. So, at some point in time, this whole thing has got, the subject changing.
Yeah, and then I'll end it with that observation. That is going to happen, although I know that the most popular and well-known effort to get it on the ballot failed. And so that does mean that come November, it will be law. So just with that in mind, like I said, we're getting everybody to that finish line, and then it'll probably be up to the courts from there on the big stuff. So I'm happy to answer any other questions. Like I said, I would, in prep for the public hearing, I think the memo does a great job. Read through it. If you have questions, reach out to Megan and I. You know, we can walk you through it as best we can.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Okay, moving on to number 12, communication or committee reports. The Economic Development Committee. Don't think anybody's here. Ordinance Review Committee.
We have a listing, we don't have a copy of it for you tonight, but it shows the various projects that we've been asked to look at and the status of where we are in the ORC. There are 2 pages. Next month, we should be able to supply you with a copy of it so you can see what's going on and feel comfortable with the work that's going on there. And then it'll also be available for John to take to the Township Board so they know what we're working on.
Okay. Thank you. Number 13, Planning Engineer Reports. You guys have anything else that you want to?
From a planning perspective, just that we continue to work with Enclaves Phase 3 to get them in front of you guys for a preliminary site plan. They probably will be at the first July meeting.
Okay. Nothing from Sharp Engineering tonight other than what was in your packets.
But
Okay. Well, looks like that's everything. Unless there's anything else that you would like to discuss, I'll get a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I
We are adjourned.